Hello Wargamers, I'm Invasive Ramnus, and surprisingly, I know, it comes as a bit of a shock. I'm going to be talking about stealth suits. Now these are the two different types of stealth suits that you can purchase. Of course, here's the more current model, is this guy, who's also featured in the Dawn of War video game series. And then there are these older versions that are slightly smaller. And these guys are probably the oldest models that, or not the oldest, but some of the oldest models in my collection, and definitely some of the the earliest painted models in my collection as well. And they're painted using midnight blue, which is a color that I was really sad that they discontinued. But yeah, these guys back here, I'll just give them a little plug. I won them for free from the discount game store when they were doing promotions through the 11th Company podcast. So they're not doing those anymore, but if you are in a place where you don't have access to a friendly local gaming store and you are forced to do all your purchases online, I highly recommend Discount Game Store. They're an eBay store and generally have really good prices. But of course, you should, if you have access to a friendly local gaming store, you should definitely pay where you play and support local business. All right, now back to the actual content of the review. So, at base, these guys are just a 1-wound model with a 3-up save, toughness 3. So they're not, they're slightly wimpier than a crisis suit, just based on their toughness and wound count. But they do have that same 3-up save. However, they have access to stealth suits, obviously, which give them stealth and shrouded. So +3 to any saves that they have, any cover saves that they have. So that's a 2-up save if they're in forest or any type of terrain. So they're pretty easily protected against most shooting attacks. So that means that they're going to be pretty survivable and durable, with one exception, and that's against units or armies like Tau that have access to a lot of ways to ignore cover. So Tau or anything that has a lot of ignore cover weaponry is going to be really dangerous to these guys, simply because their save is primarily based on having stealth and shrouded, right? So they can be durable with some exceptions. They come standard with the burst cannon, which got better in this edition. Now it's Assault 4 as opposed to Assault 3. You can take them in units of 3 or in units of 6. So, either these 3 or all 6. And they come with the special rules Infiltrate, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and supporting fire, like most Tau. But supporting fire probably isn't going to come into play much for these guys, just because you'll probably want to play them closer to the enemy than the rest of your army, just as a function of the weaponry range of the range of their weapons. So, and I'll talk more about that too in a moment. But supporting fire for these guys is not really that big of a deal. All right, so as far as options that you can take, you have access to a shas'vre, their standard shas'vre. You can upgrade to a shas'vre for 10 points. And, in the current models, that's this guy with the little support system on top. And in the old models, that's this guy with the only thing that's really different about him is he has more stuff on his gun. I think that's supposed to be a marker light, and he has like a bigger wrist computer. So that's not really here or there, but yeah. So you can upgrade him to shas'vre, and this is actually one unit where I think it might actually be worth it to do, simply because they are going to be away from the majority of your army, so they're not going to be in that ethereal leadership bubble like a lot of your other units are going to be. And it also gives them access to drones, which for the price of one stealth suit, you can buy 2 drones, actually for a little bit cheaper, and have the same number of shots, double the wounds, and they'll be twin linked. Granted, they are going to be at ballistic skill 5 unless you take a drone controller, but even then, that's still probably a better points investment than purchasing another suit. Or if you're at a unit of 6, then you don't have the option of purchasing another suit, and it's definitely worth taking the 2 drones. So, gun drones in a unit of stealth suits are going to be really beneficial. You're not going to want to take shield drones, obviously, because you're primarily ignoring wounds through your cover save, and you're not going to be shot at with low AP weaponry because of that. Marker drones are, yeah, I mean, there's always an argument for marker drones, but really, these guys are meant to be, dishing out damage. They're not. There are other places you can take marker drones or have marker light support other than this unit, and I would strongly recommend staying away from any type of drone here except for a gun drone. Another option you have is to upgrade to Fusion Blaster. One for every 3 of your guys can take a Fusion Blaster, so in a maximum squad of 6, you can take 2 Fusion Blasters. And that can be situationally beneficial, especially if you're lacking anti-tank weaponry in other places in your army list. If you're taking stealth suits, that means you're not taking crisis suits or riptides, and so you don't have access to fusion blasters in either of those slots, and so you're depending on your heavy support for anti-tank, and depending on what that looks like, you might be strongly compelled to take a fusion blaster. And of course, I don't have a fusion blaster for these guys. They didn't come with that option, and the sprue that I got for free for these guys was missing the fusion blaster, which I was actually kind of sad about, because I wanted to model them with the fusion blaster. But yeah, so 1 out of every 3 can take that fusion blaster, and it can be a good source of anti-tank if you are lacking in other places, and especially if these guys are going to be up front, they're probably going to be able to at least take a few shots at tanks. So I would recommend taking fusion blasters in your stealth team if you are taking them. So as far as support systems go for these guys, there are really 2 that people I think are more drawn to, and that they are the counterfire defense system and vectored retro thrusters. Man, both of those are a little bit of a mouthful. So the counterfire defense system gives you ballistic skill 2 shots for Overwatch, so you're hitting on 5s instead of 6s. And the vectored retro thrusters give you hit and run. And so really, if you could take both. You could give one guy the retro thrusters and the other guys the counterfire defense system, because you only need one model to have hit and run in order to actually do that. But if you were only going to choose one, which one would it be? Well, I think it would have to be the retro thrusters, because your objective, even though these guys are going to be kind of up in the bush with the enemy, your objective should still be to not be in combat. So the counterfire defense system assumes that you are going to get in combat, and that your way of dealing with it is just to be able to shoot ballistic skill 2 Overwatch instead of ballistic skill 1. Whereas the retro thrusters say, okay, if I get in combat, then I want to get out of combat. And for that reason, I think the retro thrusters are a much better choice, because because Overwatch isn't going to make that, probably isn't going to make that big of a difference in the way the close combat goes or how the charge goes. And so if you are taking retro thrusters, you can just jump back after that first round of combat. And then you can keep shooting and doing your normal Tau stuff instead of being tied up in combat or whatever. Then of course you can bond these guys, but I don't think it's really worth it, as I have discussed in many other videos. So what kind of tactics can you do with this? Well, I said I was going to talk about infiltrating more, and this is where I'm going to do it. So Infiltrate allows you to infiltrate, but also outflank. And as jetpack infantry, they can deep strike as well. So out of those three options, which one do you want to do? Well, you probably want to outflank. Infiltrating, you're still going to be back kind of by the rest of your army, where you want to be up front. You want to be near the enemy with your range 18 guns. And deep striking, if you want to be up near your enemy and you probably want to be near some sort of covers to take advantage of, or to capitalize on their stealth and shrouded, all these things, deep striking can get a little risky, a little messy. So I would say outflanking is probably the best. And you know who else outflanks? The kroot. And so kroot and stealth teams can actually probably be a pretty effective team together, just as a way of pushing enemies off objectives, claiming objectives, holding objectives. You kind of get where I'm going with this, right? So they could be a good team, and I think they synergize well. And that's actually one place where the supporting fire would actually come in handy, is if these guys are paired with a unit of kroot, and the kroot get charged, you could overwatch with your stealth team. Yeah, so what would my recommendation be? If you were dead set on running stealth suits, I would say run 5 or 6, because at 4, if you lose 1, you're taking a morale check, whereas at 5 or 6, you have to lose 2 in order to take a morale check. Again, I would say take as many fusion blasters as you can, so that'd either be 1 or 2, depending on how many you take. And I would take at least 1 with the retro thrusters. Probably if you upgraded a shas'vre, that'd be him. You'd put retro thrusters on him, because then you can protect him and do lookout stirs and make sure you maintain that ability to hit and run. But so yeah, overall, they can be a durable unit against shooting attacks. They can put out a lot of firepower for the number of models, and they're able to avoid a lot of shots by their stealth or by jump shoot jumping type of maneuvers, and they synergize well with kroot. But on the cons, they're still putting out strength 5 shots primarily, and you can get those in other places like troops. For the cost of 1 stealth suit, you can get 3 fire warriors that fire at a longer range, and even though you are giving up that 1 shot, you gain 2 additional wounds by switching from 1 model to 3 models. So fire warriors are probably going to be a more efficient use of points, just because they're going to be more resilient in a wider range of situations. And they take up an elite slot, which really shouldn't be taken up by strength 5 slots. Like I said, you can get that in troops, and you probably want to be taking riptides and crisis suits instead. You certainly can take stealth suits. They are good, as I have mentioned before, but I think there are better options. So yeah, overall, good unit, just probably not the best choice. All right, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and please subscribe.